Available on all streaming platforms. It's professional wrestling's greatest, largest, privately owned wrestling library. All the classic hits, flips, slams, and pins of yesteryear are on one place. It's Ultimate Classic Wrestling. Check out the Nature Boy Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Mr. USA Tony Atlas, Tito Santana, Rick Martel, a who's who of professional wrestling's greatest spotlight stars ever to grace the squared circle, all in one place. Grab the best seat in the house for memories and mayhem on Ultimate Classic Wrestling.
Do you get offended at being called an actor or fake?
Of course I get offended. When you've come out of a broken back, 3 years ago, I broke my neck, which they thought I was going to be paralyzed from the neck down. When you've had both your arms broken, cauliflower ears that affected your hearing, your jaw rewired twice, 11 broken noses, of course I get offended. You don't get all these injuries when you're an actor.
Lance by Chance, wrestling as the Von Erich. Read all about World Class Championship Wrestling. Who was he? Why was his character created? And why did Fritz expose his true identity on TV? Russell Black Bart. Follow Bart's 30-year career through the Carolinas, Florida, Georgia, Mid-South, World Class, and the WWF. Bart's Tell It Like It Is humor keeps you wanting more stories. The Pro Wrestling Vault, Volume 1 and 2. First-hand account short stories from wrestlers from the here and then. Get your signed copies only at WrestleVille.com. WrestleVille, it's where wrestling lives.
What's going on, everybody? This is the Pro Wrestling Wire podcast. I am Rick Del Santo. I have, all the way from New Jersey, Dangerous Adrenaline Wrestling Gladiators representative Jaden Sherman. What is going on, my friend?
Not much. I've been looking forward to this.
Yes.
I love talking pro wrestling with you. We do it every week on the Alliance Guys podcast. And now we get to talk about it and talk about Dangerous Adrenaline Wrestling Gladiators and all things pro wrestling from the glory days when we actually was good. So we can talk about that. Yes. And we can also talk about bad, like Daredevil Dave Dahl.
I tell you that do you follow, was it Charlie from Starkville on his Facebook page? Yes. Okay. So he put up the, what's something wrestling related that, causes an argument, and I had to enter that that I did not evolve with the sport of professional wrestling. I'm still stuck in the 1980s and before, so that I always it always tends to start an argument. My thought on what professional wrestling is supposed to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not sports entertainment. Unfortunately, one thing I will always say is your wrestling is influenced by your childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people were inspired by the Duke the Dumpster Drozies and the Ultimate Warriors and the Papa Shangos and a lot of that stuff. And unfortunately, also Jim Herd's WCW, which had both some really great points and then also the ding dongs and other stuff like that. So that's unfortunately how people, I think nowadays, they're inspired now by the Kenny Omegas and the Young Bucks, and I think that's what they were inspired by was the Ultimate Warrior and the sports entertainment and the video games, and obviously like WCW when Jim Herd ran it and the absurdity that he would force upon us.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, it's a lot of it, unfortunately. It's kind of like which Star Wars is yours, which will also cause any kind of arguments if you want to start one of those. Whether you're the original trilogy or whether you're the sequel, the prequel trilogy, or if you in 20 years, everybody's going to be talking about how great the sequel trilogy is, and that's just because that's what you were brought up on.
Original 3 movies. That's it for me. I feel that Jim Herd's version of WCW had some really good points to it, but it was the crap that brought the level down and made a lot of people not be able to take it seriously. Yeah, in my opinion, because there was a lot of really great moments. They had the talent pool there was amazing at the time, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I can still watch that WCW and enjoy parts of it. I mean, Brian Pillman's always going to be great, and the Midnight Express, even though they were abused, were always going to be great. And Ric Flair and Arn Anderson and Ole Anderson, even, which is, you won't hear this very much in this time, but that even the Anderson brothers at that time were great, or the Anderson cousins, or the Anderson family, or just the Andersons, or the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, whatever you want to call them. They were still great at the time, and the Steiners were great, and the Doom was great. It's just, again, you also had the Christmas creatures. Then they want to
Yes.
do the Hunchbacks or something like that, and then there was other stuff. It's just like,
Oz, you know,
yeah.
but you mentioned the Ding Dongs, and I do have to mention the Ding Dongs. It's that you brought them up. That one member, Richard Sartan, is going to be making an appearance on this podcast in the future. So we spoke recently, but he was also part of the Southern Rockers and Deep South Wrestling as well, probably from '87 to '88, which that's kind of where I first heard of them before they became the Ding Dongs.
Were they the Southern Rockers, or were they the Southern Rock and Rollers,
It might have been the
or
Southern
something
Rock
like
and
that?
Rollers or not, because I think maybe the internet always intertwines stuff and doesn't always get it 100% correct. But I think that you are actually correct now. I mean, it's been years since I've seen the video, but reading up on it, I think that what I was reading may not have been 100% accurate.
If
But
you
I
want to
think,
check them out with their actual best, in my opinion, I believe Jody Hamilton, the assassin, had Deep South Wrestling, which was
mhm,
well before it was a WWE developmental.
correct.
And I remember Nick Patrick was also, and obviously because he's related, but deeply involved into that. And that's where I saw a lot of those wrestlers that would end up being in WCW, including the Southern Rock and Rollers, or whatever their name was, whatever it ended up being.
Mhm.
And they were actually an impressive tag team. They were obviously a small independent tag team, but comparative nowadays, they would actually be huge compared to some of the wrestlers out there.
Oh
And
God, yeah, yeah,
they weren't slouches. First
yeah.
time I think I'd
No,
seen Ranger Ross too.
yeah, Ranger Ross, Dwayne Bruce, who went on to become Sergeant Buddy Lee Parker and Power Plant head trainee, was in there. I actually discovered a match that I had recently that I through YouTube that with one of my favorite wrestlers. It was Dwayne Bruce taking on Eric Embry for the World Class Junior Heavyweight Championship or Light Heavyweight
Oh,
Championship, and I had never seen this before. And when I came across it while going through like a deep dive into falling into the what do they call it, the rabbit hole of
yes.
Deep South Wrestling, and I came across that match, my eyes like popped. I was like, holy crap. And they pushed him heavily, mentioning that he is the world class light heavyweight champion, and he's defending his belt here. Man, I got to tell you, that was such an exciting thing to discover, and it was probably the best 10 minutes of the the entire evening that I watched.
Yeah, there was a lot of good on there. I mean, Eric Embry, another person, people do not give credit to how great he was.
No, nope.
Um, he did get a lot of weight late in his career when he was with USWA, but some of his early
Yeah.
stuff with Southwest Championship Wrestling, with World Class, with where else did I see him wrestle
I
in
think,
Florida?
yeah, I think he went to, I think, he was there world class and then they transitioned into USWE. Then when they shut down the Texas office, then he ended up going to the Tennessee, the wrestling in Tennessee, the Tennessee office, whatever you want to call it, for the Jarrett office over there. And
Yeah.
he had gained a significant amount of weight during that time. But I think he has one of in my opinion, a fantastic babyface run during the USWA versus World Class era.
Oh,
If you and I was thinking about that, and I've been watching some of it on the Savoldi network actually, because they own some of those tapes. It's very the crowd is going absolutely apeshit watching him and cheering for him.
oh yeah. He was super over as a babyface, and it's funny because he was a despicable heel too.
Yeah.
But he was super over as a babyface in that World Class versus the Akbar Devastation Incorporated. And I love that part of the television. I enjoyed that tremendously. That's some of my favorite World Class people. It was a brief resurgence of World Class Championship Wrestling when he was booking, and he was the focus. It actually started off ironically with a match with Kendall Windham that started that whole thing. And the Devastation Incorporated attacked Kendall Windham, and that started him fighting back, and that started his feud with Devastation Incorporated. I mean, I could deal without Tojo Yamamoto. He's well past his prime, and PY Chuhai, Phil Hickerson. That was a little whatever, but I still enjoyed that entire thing and that cage match and the crowd reaction when for years they grew up on world class and the biggest thing in the world and how they just were happy to see it go shows how much that Eric Embry was loved and how well he put that storyline together and that final angle and the final blow off. I mean, it continued after that too, sometimes to detriment, but it was from that point forward, it was a beautifully executed uh, storyline that people need to emulate and need to watch more and learn more about. There's a lot of wrestlers that people don't pay enough attention to. Eric Embry being one of them.
Yeah, 100%. He doesn't get talked about enough. I spoke to him not that long ago about doing a podcast, and we're going back and forth conversing because he does not do many of them. I think he's only made like 3 podcast appearances. So hopefully we can get him aboard and do this interview. But he's doing a signing in my area too, through a friend of mine as well, coming up in I think September. So he's coming or flying, I shouldn't say driving, but coming up to the Northeast for a signing. So that's pretty exciting. I hope to get to meet him during that time period for that
Uh,
signing.
that that's awesome. There's a lot of wrestling conventions around where I live, but they're all kind
Mhm.
of use mostly the same people.
Mhm.
And it's nice, but every once in a while I like seeing people that you don't see. Like I want to see somebody bring in another one of my favorites from that area, Iceman King Parsons.
That would be amazing. That'd be simply amazing. Like I usually go for any of the 1 or 2 territory stars that are still, in existence that are brought
Yeah.
in, and it's because it just seems like it's dwindling down less and less every year as we go on. And I'm trying to think. I'm doing a convention this week. I'm going to be part of Wrestling Classic 6. I got a vendor table there, me and a couple wrestlers there. And I know JBL is going to be there and a couple other people. I can't think off the top of my head now Jules Strongbow is going to be there as well.
Oh,
So
somebody
yeah.
I've seen a lot in my area. During the birth of the independence in the Northeast, Joel Strombo, Hillbilly Cousin Luke, um, SD Jones, and Iron Mike Sharp and everything were always in a lot of the promotions around here. Nikolai for every once in a while.
Yeah.
They were the birth of the independents around here, and that's who you saw a lot. The NWF with
Yep.
one of my absolute favorites, Mad Dog DC Drake.
I'm gonna
He
have to
I
I'm gonna have to tell you that I was about to bring up that same exact thing you just mentioned. That's the first time I really got to see DC Mad Dog Drake, and I got to meet him at a convention 2 years ago, the New England Hall of Fame. And I'll let you continue your story in a second, but I'm sorry to cut you off. But we
It's okay.
were, I had no clue we were sitting next to each other the entire evening until they called his name. And then when, because he does not look like DC Mad Dog Drake, did on
Yeah.
TV. And as soon as the end of the night ended, because I think we had like 5 other inductions, and it was so exciting. I was like, "Holy crap, DC Man Dog Drake!" As soon as the night ended, I jumped up onto my seat and followed him out, introduced myself, and we chatted for a long time. And then the next morning, we were actually coincidentally stationed next to each other for the New England Fan Fest, which was pretty awesome. So we spent like a good portion of the day chatting about wrestling and independent wrestling in that era, the 80s and early 90s, which to me, and I'm sure you'll agree with it, the way that, we tend to agree on stuff. It's like one of the greatest eras for independent wrestling. Some of the talent was just awesome. It's not, there'd be guys in between promotions, WWF and NWA, and groups like the NWF or the Savoldis and stuff like that. It was just an awesome era to me.
Yeah. I agree, and I love the NWF. Chief Joel Strongbow,
Yeah.
the Bruiser Brody, the Fantastics. That was Paul Heyman's, I think,
Hmm.
original like major start was the
Yes.
NWF. Yeah,
Yeah.
I enjoy. I have fond memory. Excuse me, I have fond memories of it. I always try to if anything shows up on YouTube or anywhere else, it's one of the things I get lost down watching.
I think Wendy Richter was in there.
Yeah, Wendy Richter, true.
Uh, who else was in there? I'm trying to
Heidi Lee
think.
Morgan was there.
Yep. Oh, just confirmed I will be doing an interview with Heidi Lee Morgan as well very soon.
Man, I'm just feeding you everything, aren't I?
You are unintentionally feeding. Yes. But yeah, I actually got and spoke with her the other day, and we're just working on a date to get it settled. And then We agreed to it. So I'm looking forward to that one too because I used to watch it when you remember watching like in the was it late 80s, early 90s LPWA
Yes.
on I used to get it on the MSG network and that Joe Pedicino was on it and Jim Cornette I believe hosted it too as well.
Yes.
Yeah. I
He
like
used that
that
as an
show.
excuse not to go back to WCW.
Yeah, was it okay? That was that period. So that was a weird period for wrestling, I thought, and especially for him and like the Midnight Express.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually, though, again, we're talking about the NWF. Heidi Lee Morgan. Her father Les was one of the trainers for Breaker Morant, former Dangerous Adrenaline Wrestling Gladiators heavyweight
Oh
champion,
wow. Very
two-time
cool.
dog champion.
Very cool. Very cool. Very cool. So let's talk about your fandom, other than what we're discussing. How did you discover the world of professional wrestling, or wrestling as a whole?
Two people, my uncle and my older brother. I'm way younger than my siblings. I'm a change of life baby. So my siblings are anywhere between 13 to 23 years older than me on my mom's side.
Oh wow.
And so my brother grew up watching wrestling, and he used to come mow our lawn, him and his friend Johnny, and they used to tell me that they were the Valiant brothers. And they were coming to mow the lawn, and then they were going to defend the WWF Tag Team Championships at the Spectrum that night, you know. And as a dumb little kid, I believed it. But my brother got me interested into the National Wrestling Alliance style of wrestling, and my
Right.
uncle got me more interested into the World Wrestling Federation style of it. He used to bring me backstage to the Hamburg Fieldhouse and other TV taping locations, where I got to meet wrestlers like Hulk Hogan and Mr. T and Wendy Richter and Paul Orndorff and that whole group of wrestlers. I got to be backstage because he had some connections back then. So I used to got to see all these guys in the WWF, and my brother was the one that got me interested in Dusty Rhodes and the Road Warriors and Ric Flair. And then when he moved in, he started collecting wrestling tapes, and we were one of the original tape trading groups where people were coming a lot, buying a lot of us, including somebody who wants to pretend people are over 18, whose name I won't mention, but it claims that a lot of his videotapes were his, and if you got it from anybody else, you were getting a replica, you were getting a copy, a cheap copy. But in reality, I'd say a good maybe 30% of his videotapes came from the collection of my brother and myself. So,
Every time he said that, that's when the tapes would be like, it looked like it was a 10th generation video. It was just awful quality. Every time he
yeah,
said that, if this is original copy, and it's like there's no way in hell because it just looks so awful. Because I used to buy from him a lot. I used to buy from him. I was a tape trader as well, so I wonder if we ever run into each other that way many, many moons ago because it was like it was a small circle through
yeah.
magazines and and then I think in the earlier 2000s through message boards and stuff. There was the Crazy Max board, the Death Valley Driver board, and I think it was it Wrestling Classics? Or no, Kayfabe Memories. I think had the trading board as well, if I remember correctly.
Some of this was even before trading boards. We were still sending out sheets on paper, printing them up,
Yeah.
mailing them to people, and they would mail us what they would have, and we would often converse back and forth what we'd want to trade, sometimes even by telephone.
Yes. And
So we would,
I met a guy locally well, he lived like 45 minutes from me when I was in high school. So, and we traded back and forth. And I don't know if you remember a guy named Mark Herzog at all, who was a tape trader from
yeah, actually,
yeah,
I do remember
yeah,
the name. Yeah,
yeah. And I used to get to me, he had like a lot of really great quality and he collected the Mid-Atlantic Arena tapes. So he was always on the hunt for those where I was just kind of I think later period AWA I was looking for that I couldn't find, and mostly like independent stuff. Like if you remember Northeast Championship Wrestling, which was Tommy Jeanette, the pop singer from the '60s, he ran an organization, Northeast Championship Wrestling. So I was always looking for videos of that, which were mostly handheld, I believe.
for us in the area, there was a period of time where we had 23 and one half hours of original run wrestling a week.
That's crazy.
And of course, some of it's like the big time, like WWF and NWA and AWA. But we also had World ICW, we had UWA, we had Championship Wrestling from Florida, we'd have all kinds of stuff. So my brother would record all that, and then he would trade it to different people. We even started trading it to a place in Japan that would send us Japanese stuff because they wanted all the American stuff. So they loved everything we were sending them, even though it was right off of television to us. And then they were sending us stuff from Japan, which was right off of television or copies of whatever tapes that they happen to do. So it was really neat. Plus, we'd also love going to. We had like at the time like 6 or 7 video stores that weren't Blockbuster, where we can get a lot of wrestling tapes you wouldn't think. And half of the people just you give them an offer, they'd sell you the tapes instead of having to even rent it. So we would have tapes from you wouldn't even expect, like weird stuff from like one of my favorites is I found it in a flea market, was the I Like to Hurt People movie.
I
And that
rented that from the video store as a kid because the one of the video stores that was closest to my house, I had a Blockbuster, I had another one independent, and then there was like a small chain in the state of Connecticut called Tommy K's, and they had wrestling videos, and so I used to go to like different ones, and then I ended up managing one of the stores like eventually. But they had like tons of like, they used to have all sorts of different wrestling videos. So I used to get like
yeah
if you remember the Congress video series, there was like with classic all-star wrestling, all sorts of like random stuff. So it was always fun to like find that stuff too.
yeah, and it was, and that's what we found a lot in those old video stores, things you wouldn't expect to find. You had to avoid the back room with the curtain, but otherwise there was some good stuff you could find wrestling wise. And again, you got some really weird stuff that came out from like trying to think of I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I remember some of the stuff was like uh I was even finding early Paul Bosch stuff and
Really?
stuff you wouldn't expect to see in these videotapes that people were somehow creating, so quote unquote commercial tapes and selling them out with really bad box art. But it was still, you can get them somewhere, and that's what people were doing because wrestling was hot. They sold everything back then.
Yes. I
You know.
remember going to like a what was it like a five and dime store or something like that, similar to like what like a Dollar General or Family Dollar or something like that. And they had all these VHS tapes for like $1 each. They were all like the was it the Missing Matches series, which had like tons of Memphis footage on it, mostly
Yeah.
Memphis footage, I should say, like Mid-South Coliseum. And that was really one of my first exposures to actual Memphis wrestling. I believe at least.
For me, a lot of it was like, I mean, I found a bunch of stuff for the Wrestling Gold series that was put out, I think, by Jim Cornette and was it Meltzer?
Was that the original Miss Wrestling Gold series? And then because I think didn't
Yeah,
he put
Wrestling
out
Gold 1
another
and Wrestling
one?
Gold 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had them. They were great, and I saw a lot of Memphis from that, and then obviously from tape trading. Some of the
Yeah.
tape trading we used to get was Southwest Championship Wrestling,
Hmm.
uh, and lots of stuff from Florida, and things from the Funks, and we did get a little bit of St. Louis, but we really didn't enjoy the Central States because that wasn't that great. But
I don't
we,
know. It's funny because it's like I'm going back and watching Central States now, seeing that the Savoldi's bought like a chunk of the library recently, and they started to upload some to their streaming app, the Ultimate Classic Wrestling app. And while it's not like the greatest thing on earth, I'm starting to enjoy like a lot of it, I believe. That it's kind of fun to watch. Some of it's like really kind of I don't know, it's just kind of oddball type stuff.
I mean, there is some again diamonds in the rough. Like the Oates brothers were very good, but then you also had to deal with Rufus R. Freight Train Jones, um, who is the really short Canadian dude? I think it was their booker. He was always their champion.
Not Bob Brower, Bob Brown,
Bob,
Bulldog Brower.
Bulldog Brower or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm probably combining three different names, but I know exactly who you're talking about because he's spent he wasn't very good, but he was always somehow featured very heavily in certain territories.
Yeah. Bulldog Bob Brown, I think, is actually, yeah, because
Yeah.
Bulldog Brower is a different wrestler.
Yes. Yeah. I remember getting some like Canadian All-Star Wrestling or some crap like that, and he was like all over that TV,
Yeah.
all
The,
over it.
the same wrestling, like wrestling from the Maritimes,
Hmm.
he was on a lot too. And he did some Stampede and he did some of the one that's been brought back. What's that one called? The Major League Wrestling? No, Maple Leaf Wrestling.
Yeah, Maple Leaf Wrestling. Is that supposed
Uh,
to be the continuation of Maple Leaf Wrestling, or is it
yes.
just? Oh, it is. Okay. I wasn't
It,
sure.
they just can't call themselves MLW because of Major League Wrestling.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But and that was there's a lot of great wrestling history, a lot of things that people are unfortunately WWE owning so much, and they're starting to trickle it out a little bit with WCW and other things, but there's so much great wrestling that I would love to see original copies of. If I ever get a job at the WWE, they probably wouldn't find me. I'd probably be in the vault just
Well, I knew a guy that was doing work there. And he was telling me that basically he was working in the video department. So during downtime, all he did was sit around and watch videos waiting for to do stuff, basically. So he was going and checking out like all this old stuff. And it was like, it's pretty interesting. It's like, dude, I would like, that's like my dream job. You know, because you
yeah,
know how much
right.
footage that do you know how much footage that they own that they haven't shared? That they have, look at their, what was it, Peacock? Look at how
Yeah,
much AWA stuff that they have up there that they own. There's very little. Look how much Smoky Mountain they have up there. There's
yeah.
barely anything, barely anything. And if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't they buy some Southwest Wrestling or a number of years ago? Or did they just license some of it for a video?
I don't know if they bought or sold or licensed it, but there was a lot of it in there from the civilities that they were using, some global stuff, some other stuff that they did own. They also, I think through, I'm not sure, but didn't at one time Kevin Von Erich try to sell the rights to the videos to, or at least partial of it, some of the videos to them too, and then started to make his own video later and then sell it to WWF at the time, I think.
I think if you look on the WWE on Peacock, I think it's like 1982 to like 1988. And it's weird because like the Savoldis own some of the footage as well. So it's like very questionable as to like what they own as well. And it's kind of like confusing because it's like, what exactly do they own? Because I think it's like, do they own 1988 going into the USWA storyline that we were discussing before? Like whatever that is. So I don't know. It's very hard to decipher, try to figure out because it's like I want to know, but there's anything from 1982 WWE hasn't put up on the Peacock either, on the network either from the world class because there's stuff on there like when I was interviewing Brian Blair, we were talking about him working in world class for a brief period, and there's no
Mhm.
foot. I can't find any of the footage, at least on there. I haven't seen come across it on YouTube at all.
I love YouTube, and I wish there wasn't so many problems with footage on YouTube. A lot of my favorite YouTube channels eventually end up disappearing,
Yeah,
and a lot of them don't make any money because
they
they
don't own the
actually let
rights
the
to it. Yeah,
or they also don't own the rights to it, but they play the commercial music, which is to me the best part of it. That's you can watch whatever in the WWE, but it bothers me so much when I have to listen to the bad music they play.
yeah. Listen to Rick Rude's introductions. They overdub of his music, and it's god awful to watch like a completely different
Yeah.
song that they're playing. I thought that was a song that they owned. I guess not.
The what I actually think is funny is when they play the song for the Midnight Express, which sounds nothing like the Midnight Express, or the Jimmy Garvin, which sounds nothing like Sharp Dressed Man, or for some reason they love to play that whatever that song they played for Jimmy Garvin, they played over his promos for some reason.
Very
Even when there
strange.
wasn't music playing in his promo, when I watch the original footage, they'll play his song over his promos, and I don't know. I love the old stuff. I wish sometimes I still have the tapes. Some of it I lent to MLJ, and he's supposed to make me dubs of them, but he never did. Supposed to make me digital dubs so I could just watch them myself. So MLJ, you owe me some footage, lots and lots and lots of it. That's why I haven't got more of it because you still owe me a hard drive full of the old stuff you promised me.
There's also look at the Road Warriors that they don't play Iron Man when that comes in, and
Yeah,
the it completely ruins the introduction to that. Even
yeah.
watching the ECW stuff, which was all commercialized music, it just they overdub it with whatever. It just does not sound right if you go back and watch it.
Even Misrulu, that
Yeah,
song's so old. I'm sure they could probably find a way to just play that because that's an old song. People can equate it with what was that movie?
Pulp Fiction.
Pulp Fiction. Yeah, they equated with Pulp Fiction, but that song is actually what, from the 40s to 50s?
It's from the 60s. Dick Dale, uh, surf guitar god.
Yeah.
Um, I've had the chance to see him numerous times before he passed, and it was a phenomenal, phenomenal performance each time. But anyways, back on track. They it's from the 1960s, and then it's like, yeah, that was used in was it ECW Hardcore TV for a number of years during
Yeah.
in yeah, I'm sure that they could play that, but what was the copyright? Was that I think it's like 64, 62, 63, something like that.
Yeah,
I'm sure they
I have to work on what's exactly coming through for I know there's a lot of stuff that's in public domain now, but it's real
yeah,
tricky with public domain.
yeah, yeah. So what else you got there? What else you want to throw out there?
Well, we could also talk about, just some great wrestling. I remember the
Yeah.
first time I ever saw Lucha Libre.
Yeah, that's always stuff that during watching like WCW or World Class, I would see more Mills Mascaras or Dos Caras come in. You know what I
Yes.
mean? That was like kind of like my first exposure to it, and then accidentally came across it on the Spanish station sometime later. You know what I mean? But it was never on the same time, so I never knew when to catch it really.
Again, it was people see everything like they see nowadays, and it drowns them out. Something
Yeah.
that I always explain with professional wrestling, and if anybody's young enough to listen to this, that's not our age, and when it
We're right.
rains, when it yeah, it is, we are right, but when it rains really, 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 really hard, and the water doesn't have a chance to absorb, it just runs off and takes everything with it. And it can't absorb into the ground. It doesn't water the plants. It just kind of runs off into the sewer and gets put into the ocean, and it's lost. That's kind of what, like, when you do all those holds, what you do. You need to stop to let it absorb, because if you do just move after move after move after move, it all runs out and never gets absorbed into your brain and just pushes out anything your brain currently has. So that's why I'm a big fan of, like, I like the Lucha Libre, and it was different then. But even then, if you watch it, there was some, a lot of high flying, a lot of stuff.
Psychology to it. But yeah.
Yeah,
There
they
was
actually waited, and it didn't insult your intelligence.
yes.
Sometimes that arm drag looked kind of weak, the Lucha arm drag, but it definitely didn't insult your intelligence. And nowadays, it's just like so many people see the moves and don't understand why they happen. And I know I sound like a grumpy old man, but luckily I'm not DKing and yelling at the clouds. But there's a reason that I work for Dr. Zirconium and Dog Pro Wrestling, because he uses modern athletics, but he's old school pro wrestling mixed with that. And he does things to make sure that the wrestlers that work for Dog, except for Dave Dahl, he just sucks. But the wrestlers that work for Dave Dahl, for Dog, um, they do things that's more for the crowd and less for themselves.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense. I was having a conversation with a couple different people over the last couple of weeks. It's just some things that in the world of professional wrestling in ring just don't make sense. A lot of
Yeah.
moves, like you said, move after move after move. It's like, but there's all these moves that are getting weeded out that you don't see anymore, really. When's the last time you actually saw an abdominal stretch? I was thinking about
How about
this. Like, go ahead.
how about a victory roll or a head
Th-
scissor takedown?
There you go. There you go. But those moves mean something, right? Like
Yeah.
the abdominal stretch, it's a pause. It's all psychology. It's just like it's missing that. When's the last time somebody won via backslide, just like randomly? You don't see it that often, and everything is people are kicking out of each other's finisher over and over, and then it's like the fifth time that's when it all of a sudden decides to work. I know I'm going to start sounding. This podcast tends to sometimes be me just complaining about the modern era of professional wrestling.
That's fine. I'm the same. And that's the thing too, because if it doesn't end up with the 15th time hitting your finisher, it ends with a schoolboy roll up.
Yeah.
There's so many better roll ups, the Oklahoma roll, the backslide, like you said, the small package. Wrestling doesn't even end with a small package anymore.
No.
It's
No.
a schoolboy roll up, and that's because people don't have the skill to how to do this.
Yeah. But do you watch anything modern today? Like honestly, like modern TV, wrestling, anything or
Highlights. I watch
highlights?
I don't watch Raw or AEW or anything like that. I watch sometimes it shows up on YouTube, especially Raw, and I'll test whatever the highlights are, and Raw. They give me just enough to where I can keep interested in it.
Right.
And occasionally there's a match I look forward to that I'll watch.
Mhm.
Like I went out of my way to watch the Briscoes versus FTR.
Okay.
All three of them. Third one I wasn't as big on, but the first two I liked a lot. And then I heard Gunther. He has often matches. I watched him and uh, Sheamus and Drew McIntyre. I enjoyed the hell out of that.
Yeah.
The heck out of that. There's stuff I'll occasionally put myself out to watch, and I watched the Royal Rumble just because it's the Royal Rumble.
Yeah.
I think I did watch I think I did eventually watch WrestleMania, but it was more background noise. But I rarely even watch it live nowadays. I usually wait until I can't sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'll put it on, go downstairs and watch it on the big TV.
I
But most of the time, I'm watching stuff on YouTube, and
yeah.
there's what's the channel? Indie Wrestling Archive or something like that. It's got the
Okay.
new red, white, and blue shield. I'll send you the link. I like his stuff a lot.
Please do.
Guy from YouTube. Yeah. And if now that I'll have to send you lots of good stuff because there's some channels out there I very much enjoy. And if you're actually on the alliance-wrestling.com Discord, I post matches I find that are NWA title matches or really cool stuff that I find on there. I think I recently found some black and white stuff from Luthez, and I put it on there. And I found some Ric Flair versus Ricky Steamboat from 1982 Japan NWA title match. I find that stuff I posted on there too for the rest of the guys to enjoy. But for me, I watch a lot of stuff. I do watch some Central States, but I also love watching Florida or old good wrestling. I enjoy it tremendously. Memphis, world class. I even watched some of the stuff from California, which to me was the original sports entertainment company, well past the LaBelles and well past with their AWA working prime. But when they started doing some stuff in Hollywood, it was the Mummy and other weird stuff. That is the original sports entertainment company.
Yeah.
If you're wondering where that developed, actually, I will give credit to that. Just like, people ask where hardcore develops, and I give credit to Memphis, and I give credit because, Memphis is the reason hardcore is in Puerto Rico. Memphis is the reason that the FMW started doing hardcore. Eddie Gilbert brought a lot of Memphis to Tri-State Wrestling Alliance, and so did Joe Goodhart, and that was the predecessor to ECW. And then of course you can't forget the Funks in Texas. That was the origin of the hardcore. And that's people always credit ECW as like the godfather of hardcore. No, it was a bastard stepchild by the time, because there was a lot of good hardcore wrestling that was well before that. Before now, it was all again bastardized to the garbage we're seeing today. I'll say garbage.
You're correct. I've gotten and that's one of the things that causes arguments and stuff like that with me. It's like I can't stand deathmatch wrestling or hardcore wrestling today. I actually don't like it at all, really. I used to have the tapes through tape trading, the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance, and of course, obviously, the evolution into ECW, which is I prefer the earlier era of ECW, was in 92-ish, to what, 1996, 95. And then after that, it's just kind of, once they went to pay-per-view, it just kind of went downhill, it seems.
Yeah.
And it's not
That's because
interesting.
people started taking their talent because they were no longer a tiny little fish. They were a much bigger fish that they needed to poach. And it was also around the time of the Monday Night Wars where they needed talent.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember going to shows, like they used to come up here in Connecticut a lot, and it's just like I went to the last show in Danbury, Connecticut that they did before shutting down. And it's like the building was half full. It was a TV taping. They asked everybody to move to one side to make it look full. And my God, the crowd, I came across it online somewhere and I started watching it again. I couldn't even keep focused on it because it was just so that bad that it was not the ECW of days before.
Yeah, and part of it's because of lack of talent. Also, the obviously the writing was on the wall what was going to happen. I think the TNN deal was the worst thing for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but there's some great. I mean, also though, I have to say, I watch a lot of ECW and it doesn't hold up.
No, it does not.
No,
The earlier stuff, I think that, with the Super Destroyers and guys like when the Surfer gimmick for
Sandman.
Sandman, yeah, Ray Odyssey, Snuka, Morocco, Tito Santana, Road Warrior Hawk, all those guys in there in the beginning. I enjoy that stuff. I don't know. Maybe I have bad taste, but I enjoy that kind of era of ECW. And one of the first things, like one of the best matches I saw in the semi early was like Benoit and Al Snow, and that was kind of my first exposure to Al Snow, maybe.
Mine was through tape trading because he ran a company in, I want to say Detroit, Michigan.
Okay.
And Sabu was on it sometimes, and Marty Jannetty was on it, and Dan Severn was on it, and obviously he was the big focus of it. He would always push himself against some of the top wrestlers to really get himself, put a spotlight on himself. And that's where I first saw him. That's where he started getting a name for himself. But I did see him a couple times in both Dennis Carluzzo's NWA and obviously ECW, and it was great to see him. I always did enjoy him as a wrestler, and he was ahead of his time. His first real break, though, I think that really made him pop out is when he was Dan Severn's second at the UFC. And they were asking him, like, what is Dan Severn doing to prepare himself? And he's like, he's going out for the next match. He's like, he's going to back and have sex. That's a smart ass answer for a dumb question, I guess. And I think that's the first time Al Snow's humor came along that I first saw that. And that was the beginning, I think, where people knew Al Snow was a little bit more than just a kind of bland but talented high flying wrestler.
Yeah. I was able to attend some of the Dennis Corluzzo shows. We used to drive up to Jersey to go to them when he was I guess his protege was Tommy Fierro, right? At
Yeah,
that
Tommy
yeah,
Fierro. He
yeah.
had a whole menagerie of scumbag and villainy that would surround himself. I'm not saying Tommy Fierro is that, but there was a lot of it, like Gino Moore and Doc Diamond
Hmm.
and um, uh, Joe Panzerino and a
Hmm.
lot of that menagerie of carnival freaks that started becoming promoters on their own. A lot of people branched off from Dennis Carluzzo to start their own stuff. Ricky was another one. Who else? I know there's probably more that I'm missing, but some of them were very carny in the worst sense of the word.
Right.
And they're the ones that would pull your posters down or do all the other stuff that wrestling's independent wrestling in this state was famous for. They were the ones that were leading a lot of that, and they were screwing over wrestlers and using ticket sellers. And I was one of the original plants for Eastern Championship Wrestling, where they were at Mike Schmidt Sports Bar in Philadelphia.
Really? Explain this.
My friend Sean and myself were planted by Stevie Wonderful to be part of the Stevie Wonderful fan club. He'd give us signs to hold up for Stevie Wonderful. And then my brother was recording these events. So we got to sit front row. He got us front row tickets to these events that we did for free because we would hang up, we would cheer for Stevie Wonderful, and we would have the Stevie Wonderful signs and we would talk about stuff. And I remember he used to bring us backstage and meet some of the wrestlers. That's where we first met Vivacious Veronica. And he asked about Vivacious Veronica. My friend Sean asked her for an autograph. She kissed his autograph book. And I said, can I get an autograph on my cheek? And she kisses my cheek. And I remember everybody was so jealous. And then somebody said, you should wash her face right away. You don't know where she's been. But yeah, we were planned for Stevie Wonderful for when it used to be at the Eastern Championship Wrestling at the Mike Schmidt Sports Bar. A lot of the early stuff was recorded by my brother with Tommy Cairo versus, I think the very first time we saw Tommy Cairo in ECW was he was wrestling against Damian Stone, who became Little Guido. And
Yeah.
I remember, I think it was Stevie Richards versus Larry Winters. I think that was Stevie Richards' first ECW match. And there was, there you saw Ivan Koloff and Tatsumi Fujinami and Jimmy Snuka and Nikolai Volkov and a lot of wrestlers in the early ECW days. Don Morocco, who was one of my brother's favorites, and a lot of those wrestlers in the early ECW, Mike Schmidt Sports Bars days, my brother was doing the recording for it. And then we would trade those videotapes because he would make copies and give them to ECW, but we'd keep the originals.
That's awesome. That's great.
He used to record for Dennis Carluzzo too, when he was at the Route 30 Mall for when Carluzzo and Larry Sharp together. And my favorite wrestlers, I had three favorite wrestlers I liked. Actually, two favorite wrestlers I liked a lot in those days was the Boy Gone Bad, Joe Daniels, and Chris Candido. And that's where I first met Tammy. And during that, when she was sitting completely bored out of her mind while I was doing an interview for my school newspaper with Chris Candido.
That must have been fun. I met them just as they were getting signed to WWE. They at WrestleMania 11. I was wearing a Sabu shirt, and they had like the fan fest prior to it, and there's Chris and Tammy just walking around, and Chris saw my shirt and just started pointing at the sky like that when he saw me wearing the shirt, and then that was it. I ended up having a pre-skip autograph. He signed it, Chris Candido, and then he would show up on TV a few weeks later as Skip.
Yeah, that's a shame because he was so talented. I was
Absolutely.
I actually met him right after his USWA run with Nightmare Danny Davis, because for some reason somebody handed out a bunch of Nightmare Danny Davis pictures for us to hold up during his match. I don't know if it was intentional or somebody was ribbing him or what, but we would all hold up Danny Davis pictures because he was feuding with Danny Davis in USWA for this USWA Junior Heavyweight title back then.
Right. So let's talk about your entry into the business of professional wrestling.
Awesome.
Yeah.
In 1980, no, no. in 1864, I'm not as old as DK though. He actually saw a really historic match in person, David versus Goliath. He had front row seats.
There's not many people there. It's a small
Yeah,
arena. Yeah.
I heard David rocked.
So, how did you get into the world of professional wrestling? Didn't never compete in ring, did you?
I competed in ring, yeah, but I
Yeah,
even
okay,
started
that's what I
before
thought.
that.
I thought we talked about that on the Alliance guys one night that it came up. So tell me about that. What made you decide to do that and talk about that a little bit?
Started off way before. Again, my uncle and my brother used to bring me to wrestling, and we were started off where I was doing various things like kind of setting the chairs. We were plans for Stevie Wonderful. Uh, what was his name? I don't know why I can never remember his name. He works for NBC in Philadelphia. He's a sportscaster, and he used to write a wrestling newsletter, and I used to write under him under multiple pseudonyms, and then sell them at different wrestling events that I would add. He would give me I would sell them for $5, and he'd give me 25 cents for each one I sold. Cheap bastard. Uh,
Jeez, that's not much. Would you get $2 at the end of the night?
no, I ended up with a good $10, $15, which for a teenager it was okay, but
Yeah.
I like the fact that he also used to give me videotapes and trade me videotapes, even though, um, what's his name? Every time I go to think of it, I have it in my head and then it pops out. But
What was the
he
name
still
of the
owes me.
newsletter? Oh,
I don't
sorry.
even remember that now. That tells you how my brain is so damaged. But he's a sports newscaster now, and like one of the major networks. Every time I think of his name and it pops in my head, then it disappears. This is where brain damage in pro wrestling and concussions mess with you people. Protect your brain while you can, because otherwise you forget simple stuff like this. Um, but he would also trade me videotapes, and he still owes me Ric Flair versus Davey Boy Smith in England. That was the last videotape he promised me that I never got. But I used to do that and then work. Again, my brother was recording for Dennis Carluzzo and then later for the ECWA. So he would record that stuff, and sometimes we'd even do commentary over it. And we were told I did a very good job in commentary. But I always wanted to be in professional wrestling. That was my ultimate goal. Unfortunately, I was 5'5", about 119 pounds. I got out of high school. I mean, this was like my entire high school career. I think I was 125 pounds. I wrestled between 103 and 125 in the amateur circuit, but I was a natural 112 pounder, and I would get in. I started wanting to train. I went to Larry Sharp School first to try out for the Monster Factory, and he basically told me like, "Hey, you'll never be anything, but I'll take your money," and that kind of set me off. I didn't like that, so I found out there was a wrestling school in Florida run by Lucifer and Carnage. I'm not Florida. I'm sorry, Maryland. Lucifer and Carnage. So I would go down there and wrestle and train for them and do wrestling for there. And we did a bunch of really crap shows, but they also had a loose association with, I think it was MEWF at the time. And so we would do little backstage, or we were the guys getting beat up, or we were the security, or we would come in masks and get beat up. But he wrestled these little tiny little shows in this dumpy warehouse, and then later we would just do random stuff for like MEWF to get beat up when he was in that promotion. But then I started going to the CZW wrestling school run by John Zandig, but the trainers at the time were East LA, Bobby and Angel of East LA. They were a tag team, the Brothers of East LA. And then there was Reverend John Dahmer and the Reckless Youth were a lot of the people that were doing the training. So I got to work with a lot of them and learn different stuff. Jose Rivera Jr. I learned so much from him too. I was smaller, so he taught me how to use my size to my advantage. I completely ignored it because I wanted to be like the next Mick Foley mixed with Ric Flair. So everything he told me and all the stuff he was showing me how to do, I kind of just, I don't want to do that. I want to be Ric Flair meets Mick Foley, which was such a weird combination. So I started doing a bunch of stupid stuff. But, I worked for CZW, and then I would wrestle throughout the independents. Then I had multiple little gimmicks, mostly small stuff. Occasionally I did something for Carluzzo, but mostly I did like tiny stuff that she would like. I would call it outlaw for the indies. Like there was the independents, and then they had their outlaws. That was the stuff out there. That's what we were doing a lot of wrestling. We wrestled for a promotion SWF in Maryland, and I blew out my knee, so I was taking a little time off. When I came back, I actually had some weight on me. I was about 145 pounds. Doesn't sound like much, but for me, that was a lot of weight. I think I even got to as much as 160 before I got hurt. I broke my neck and cracked my C4, C5, and C6. So I transitioned out of wrestling because that was pretty much done from that point forward to managing. And that's when I was managing. My original manager name was Tellin D Truth. I told D Truth, D whole truth, and nothing but D Truth. And most wrestling promoters didn't like it, but they love the name Jaden. So that's what they just made me go under. And then when I was managing, I was working with Doc Diamond's World Wrestling. Actually, I believe at the time it was NWA Over the Top. And one of the Soul Brothers was the booker, Danny, the Soul Brother, I think, or Elvin or whatever his name was there. He liked the name Jaden, so I started using that, managing a tag team of the Sensational One and the Divine One, One in a Million. And they were the wrestlers I was talking about working the SWF. They were the two biggest stars, and they were both feuding with each other at the time. But I brought them to that promotion as a tag team because they used to be a tag team, and they got over really well. They were small too. I mean, the gimmick was they were over 800 pounds counting their ego, but probably together they weighed about 250. But they wrestled like super heavyweights and get surprised when somebody would body slam them. They would act like Hogan got body slamming Andre, like that was a big, huge deal. And they got over very well, former NWA New Jersey Tag Team Champions. S1 continued to wrestle. I continued to manage him. Started managing Dirty Money. Managed Mercedes Martinez for a little bit. Managed a bunch of different wrestlers. Got back into different wrestling promotions. Got back with Doc Diamond, working with, at the time, DWF, and doing a lot of stuff with him. Working with the EWA, which was, I can't think of the promoter's name. He was a heavy set wrestler. Used to wrestle like the Bounty Hunter. Working for, God, I can't remember. Again, brain damage is a really bad thing. People, take care of your brain. Don't take chair shots. Watch your concussions. I've had over 10 documented. I can't tell you how many undocumented I have. Don't get punched in the face as many times as I have. Don't get, don't play hockey and with concussions. It's really bad for your brain. But there was a lot of other wrestling promoters, unfortunately, their names I can't think of. We'd work for them. I first met Fred Rubenstein, Fred Richards, through Doc Diamond when he was the NWA Over the Top. And we have always kept a cordial agreement together, and we worked together and always got well together. When I finally decided I was going to promote my own wrestling company, I was working with other people doing all the work and then getting none of the money and none of the credit. And so I decided I was going to break off on my own. I was actually, the reason I even did is I was working with Force One Pro Wrestling. It started with Tommy Cairo and Phil Varlise, and then they became later, they sold it off. And it was at the time, I think it was White Lotus and um, another wrestler owned it. And then later a different wrestler owned it too. It was a bunch of, it went through a bunch of different owners. But the time when I broke off is when I was going working with them, and it was owned by Johnny Calzone, and he brought in brain damage. He brought in somebody I didn't like as the booker, and we just didn't get along, and I was no longer working that. So I started DAWG pretty much out of spite, because I was actually talking to Johnny Calzone about buying it from them and starting, running Force One myself and working with them, and it just didn't really do anything. I wanted to do something with them and buy into it, but I didn't like the guy. He's now, I think, in Impact Wrestling. He was at MLW. He did WWE. It's like mostly one of those garbage, CZW garbage hardcore wrestlers. He would promote Force One to get himself over, and then promote all the people that were the bookers and owners of the promotions he wanted to work for, so he could, get spots in those company. Again, he's just one of those guys. Jim Cornette calls him a warthog. I can't think of his name.
You can't think of his name. This is a juicy piece of information. You can't remember.
Oh, like I said, he works for Impact. He's heavy set now. He was skinnier then. Worked for CZW. He's a former CZW champion. I'm giving you clues if you want to look it up, start Googling it. But Johnny Calzone was the owner, and he was the booker. He was taking advantage of Jimmy Clydesdale, and I didn't like him. I never did. He early in his career, he was kind of talented when he was kind of wrestler, but when he started getting into the ultra-violent garbage bullshit stuff that a lot of the stuff now he does. I know he was working for MLW, and he almost cost them a building because they were told not to go outside, and he decided to do it anyway.
I'm trying to think of what period was this? 2008, 2006, Justice Payne, Eddie Kingston, Chris Hero. I don't think it's any of them. Ruckus.
No, I love Ruckus. Ruckus was awesome.
I remember him very well. I'm trying to.
Yeah, I can't talk about how great Ruckus is. If anybody doesn't know Ruckus, look him up, especially when he was a little heavier and he was still doing some of the stuff. But even his early stuff later stuff was still amazing. I think he still wrestles now, and he's still pretty good.
Yeah. Anyways, we'll talk about this.
Sammy Callahan.
Okay. Sammy Callahan. Okay. Yeah. He's been kind of all over. I think he did a bid in NXT for a little bit too. Okay. That's kind of a bigger name to forget.
Brain damage, people. Brain damage. So that's when I started hooking up with Dr. Zirconium, and Dr. Zirconium was the guy that's like, I wanted to work with him. He was such a smart, intelligent guy because he hired me, and we worked together, and we put DAWG on the map.
Okay. Right.
He was the guy behind the scenes, and I was the guy in the locker room. And when the guys were getting paid, it was usually me paying them.
And what year did you guys start DAWG?
2009 is 2008 unofficially. 2009 trying to promote and getting screwed out of building after building, where a bunch of events started getting canceled. And then 2010 was our first official, April 24th, 2010. That's why DAWG's been celebrating its 15th glorious year.
Oh, congratulations. Now, you guys have a big show coming up next weekend.
Not true.
Not true. A big event coming up next weekend.
Because DAWG doesn't run shows. DAWG runs events. Other wrestling companies run shows. DAWG runs events.
Yes, I forgot. I have to watch what I say when speaking to you. So, regarding the events. So, next Saturday, you're holding the All-American Bash, June 28th.
That's next Saturday? I think it's 2 Saturdays from now.
Oh, shit. Maybe that is 2 Saturdays. I'm looking at the wrong calendar, apparently.
Yeah.
2 Saturdays from now. 28th of June. Apparently I'm in the wrong week in real life.
Yeah, but
So
on June 28th, they're going to be at the Max Fit. I'm sorry, that's an old thing. At the Sacred Heart Church, located at 103 4th Street in beautiful, historic Riverton, New Jersey. Dangerous Adrenaline Wrestling Gladiators presents the All American Bash. Do you want to talk about some of the matches?
sure, let's go across. Let's go through them. It's for the main event, I believe it's the Dog Championship. Vinny the Fixer taking on the Marvelous. Marvelous just appeared on the podcast, the Alliance blog podcast with JayCal just this earlier this week. So that was a
Yeah.
very exciting interview to watch.
Yeah, very talented wrestler. Smaller than, a lot of wrestlers in Dog, but it's great because he's got so much personality, so much charisma, so much talent. He is a hidden gem that people need to start paying attention to. He's been around for a little while now. He's been wrestling for some time, but he's just now getting the recognition that I think that he deserves. Even though he's been wrestling for a while, working for the Monster Factory, working for other companies, did some stuff with TNA, did some stuff with MLW, just worked around. It's just has really, really been around and done a lot. This is his first main event and his first championship shot at the Dangerous Adrenaline Wrestling Gladiators Championship.
Oh.
So it's a big deal for him. A lot of wrestlers don't realize that when you get your first big main event where you are the reason, the main attraction, and you're getting an important match at a championship, it's a big deal for him. And he's really done a lot to deserve that. He's been around with Dogs since I think 2018. And he wrestles whenever we can get a chance to get him because he is pretty popular now. He is starting to break out into a big star. He's in the Monster Factory, he's more known as a tag team wrestler with Dad Bod. They're called the Body Snatchers, but he's a very, very underrated and extremely popular singles wrestler in Dangerous Adrenaline Wrestling Gladiators. And I can't wait to see that match. People consider it a clash of styles because he's a little more high flying, a little more daredevil, while Vinny the Fixer's straight. Come in, I'll punch you in the face, I'll potty slam you. I use more a mixture of like Greg Valentine and Tully Blanchard. Vinny the Fixer is, but I think